The moment I answered the phone, I was shocked by David's bizarre statement. I put the baby in the locker. I couldn't understand what he meant by his words, which he said while laughing. My daughter, whom David is calling the baby, is right beside me, sleeping soundly and looking comfortably asleep. My daughter is sleeping right next to me, though. Huh? David thought my words were a joke and said, half jokingly, "Why are you pretending to be calm?" I'm not pretending to be calm, it's true. Then who the heck is in the locker? That moment I realized that David had indeed put a baby in the locker, and I turned pale. My name is Isabella and I turned 33 this year. I usually work as a nursery teacher, but I'm currently on maternity leave. My daughter Charlotte was born 6 months ago. Although parenting is hard, my child is so adorable that I somehow enjoy taking care of her. My husband David is a businessman of the same age. We met through a friend's introduction and got married 2 years ago. As I heard from my friend, he's a great guy but seems to have no luck meeting women. I found David cool from the moment we met. David is about 6.5 feet tall, and hearing that he works for a trading company, I was definitely interested. He's thoughtful, and during dates, he always respects my thoughts and ideas. I've always wondered why someone as wonderful as David hadn't married until now. When I asked him directly, he simply replied with pleasant words. I just hadn't found the right person yet. I see. I lightly brushed off David's statement while secretly being happy that he had chosen me. Even after getting married, we enjoyed a peaceful life without any major problems. At first, we enjoyed our time together slowly. Then one day I found out I was pregnant. As a nursery teacher who loves interacting with children, I was overjoyed the moment I knew I was pregnant. While containing the excitement in my heart, I immediately shared the news with David. Hey, David, it looks like I'm pregnant. Really? That's great. Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you. David took my hand with a smile of joy, and at that moment, my happiness doubled. Both of us were looking forward to the birth of our child. And then, about 8 months later, our long-awaited daughter Charlotte was born. I expected David to be happy, but for some reason he looked downcast. Perhaps the reality of becoming a father hadn't yet settled in his mind. It might be an emotion similar to the maternity blues that pregnant women experience. What's wrong? Aren't you happy? No, it's not that. You see, I'm worried if I can handle being around kids. Is that all? Don't worry, you'll get used to it soon. Leave it to me, I'm a nursery teacher. Yeah, I hope I get used to it soon. It seemed that David became anxious about whether he could interact properly with children now that they were actually in front of him. The weight of new parental responsibilities must have filled his heart with anxiety. It's normal for everyone to feel anxious about new experiences, so I thought, is that all? And felt relieved. At this point, I didn't take David's words too seriously and thought about growing together gradually. I had no idea that David would soon start behaving unexpectedly. After the hospital stay post-delivery, I returned home with Charlotte. Even as a nursery teacher, I was full of confusion with my first experience of parenting. The late-night feedings every night were toughest moments, and the lack of sleep accumulated day by day. I tried not to wake David, who had to go to work every day. But 1 month after delivery, I was exhausted from sleep deprivation and physical pain. It was truly a tough time. One Sunday, when David was off work, I asked, "Could you please take care of Charlotte for a little while?" I wanted to rest a bit during that time. I didn't want him to take care of her all day, just for an hour or two. However, David's face turned displeased at my words, as if he couldn't believe it. "You should be able to do that yourself. Didn't I tell you I can't handle child rearing?" "Don't say that. Just watching her for a bit is fine. She mostly sleeps, and when the time comes, just give her some milk." "What are you talking about? I can't give her milk." I was really surprised by David's sudden change of attitude. The David I knew before Charlotte's birth would have definitely listened to such a request. In fact, I thought he was the kind of man who would say, "Aren't you tired? You can rest a bit." But the reality was the opposite. David was not willing to help with child rearing at all. I wondered if he found Charlotte's presence bothersome. If only Charlotte wasn't here, we could have spent a relaxing weekend together. Child rearing is such a hassle. Such heartless words came out. Certainly, since the birth of the child, we hardly had any time to go out or spend time together, so I understand the stress. However, I vividly remember David being very happy when I reported the pregnancy. That's why I fully trusted David. I had naively believed that David would become a cooperative and wonderful father in child rearing. However, the reality was different from my expectations. David showed no interest in childcare and even started muttering, "If only Charlotte weren't here." "Don't say things like that," I argued, but each time I heard David's words, I felt sad and my heart ached. However, the David in front of me was no longer the kind and thoughtful man he used to be. With a click of his tongue in response to my words, David went back to his room in a bad mood. I sighed and ended up taking care of the childcare alone during the weekend. It had already been half a year since David's unexpected neglect of childcare came to light. I continued to raise Charlotte alone, just like before. Having experience as a nursery teacher, I was confident and thought, "I'll be fine," but raising my own child brought many worries and stress. Of course, treating my own child made me surprisingly more nervous than handling other people's children. Recently, in addition to neglecting childcare, David began to frequently leave the house. Why does David dislike seeing Charlotte's face? Charlotte had grown significantly since birth and often uttered words like "ah" and sometimes even shouting loudly. Each time David seemed irritated and said, "So noisy." I was happy with Charlotte's growth, but it seemed all of it was bothersome to David. Even when Charlotte first rolled over, David said dismissively, "This is going to be more troublesome now." As for weaning, I did all the preparation and cooking, and the days became much harder than before. David just watched me struggle without offering any help. "I'm going to stay out this weekend, so I'll be leaving the house." "Oh, really? Then maybe I should go to my mother-in-law's house." "Do whatever you want." My parents' house was in another state, far away, but my in-laws lived just a 10-minute walk away. So when childcare got particularly hard, I would ask for my mother-in-law's help. She adored her first grandchild and took care of her kindly, a truly invaluable presence. "Then I'll drop by my in-laws. Thanks." David seemed to avoid taking care of Charlotte on his days off. He often came home late on weekdays and went out for some reason or other on weekends. I had grown accustomed to David's behavior, essentially raising Charlotte like a single mother. That weekend, after David left, I planned to head to my mother-in-law's house, but then I noticed Charlotte seemed to have a cold. She was coughing and had a runny nose. I decided it wasn't serious enough for a hospital visit, but it seemed cruel to take her outside, so I called my mother-in-law. "Sorry, Charlotte seems to have a cold, so I don't think I can come over today." "Oh dear, that's tough. It's a shame I can't see Charlotte, but if it's a cold, it can't be helped. Come visit another time, dear." "Yes, I'll contact you again then. Thank you." My kind mother-in-law sounded disappointed not to see Charlotte, but was concerned about me. Grateful for her thoughtfulness, I decided to spend a quiet day at home. Charlotte, despite having a cold, seemed in good spirits and not too unwell. I watched over Charlotte, who was sleeping soundly, feeling relieved. Since Charlotte's birth, my relationship with David had grown distant, almost like returning to my single days. However, now my days were spent at home without makeup or nail polish, just taking care of Charlotte. Even though I was dedicating myself to Charlotte, I sometimes felt empty when I was alone. Overwhelmed by these feelings, I dozed off on the sofa. When I woke up, 2 hours had passed, and Charlotte was still asleep. I noticed the vibration of my smartphone on the table. I wondered who it could be from and checked the display. It was David. I thought to myself, when was the last time David called, and answered the phone, still groggy. "Hey, Isabella, is that you?" "Yes. What's up all of a sudden?" David sounded somewhat cheerful. I waited, wondering what he would say. "Don't be surprised by what I'm about to say." "So, what is it? Hurry up and tell me." I was getting irritated by David's unnecessarily dramatic manner. However, I was dumbfounded by his next words. "I just dumped the baby in a locker." "What? A locker? What does that mean?" I couldn't understand what David was talking about and felt suspicious. After all, my daughter, whom David is calling the baby, is quietly sleeping next to me. If David is trying to surprise me with a joke, it's in very poor taste. Can't he come up with a more realistic lie? Charlotte is sleeping right next to me, though. Huh? He thought my words were a joke and said, jokingly, "Why are you pretending to be calm?" "I'm not pretending to be calm, it's true." "Then who's in the locker?" At that moment, I realized David had indeed put a baby in a locker, and I went pale. "What? Wait a minute, you really put a baby in a locker?" "That's what I've been saying. I went back to my parents' house earlier because something got canceled. You weren't there, and there was a baby in the bed, so I hid it in a locker at the station. It's hot today. I wonder how it's doing now." David, still not believing that I was at home with my daughter, said something outrageous. "I can hardly believe you put Charlotte in a locker. Charlotte caught a cold, so I've been home all day. That's why she's right here next to me. Want me to show you on a video call?" After I said that, David seemed to finally realize that what I was saying was true. The laughter I had been hearing stopped, and he seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. "No way. Then whose baby is that?" "Anyway, take me to that locker right now. Hurry." Though I wondered why there was another baby at my in-laws, saving the baby in the locker was my top priority. I left the house with Charlotte, who was still sleeping, strapped to my back. Soon, David arrived in his car and I got in. Seeing Charlotte on my back, David was shocked. I couldn't believe he had mistaken another baby for his own and put it in a locker. Although I wanted to reapproach him for many things, arguing was not the priority now. David hurriedly got out of the car and fumbled his way back to the locker. It's only been a little while since I put it there. It should be fine. Glaring at David, who was trying to reassure himself optimistically, I quickly opened the locker. How could this? Inside the locker was a baby, face red and lying limp from the heat. I immediately took the baby out of the locker and tried to give it milk that I brought from home. Gently tapping the baby's mouth with the nipple of the bottle, the weak baby started to suckle the milk feebly. See, it's alive. I worried for nothing. Furious at David's unbelievable statement, I felt my blood boil. Do you even realize what you're saying? If we were a step later, this child could have died. But it survived, didn't it? They don't die that easily. It was clear that David wasn't going to listen to any lecture. Realizing this, I immediately called an ambulance to save the baby. The baby was taken to the hospital and examined. It was on the verge of dehydration, but had no life-threatening conditions, the doctor informed. Relieved, I felt a profound sense of relief. I immediately contacted my mother-in-law. She sounded like she was about to cry, relieved that everything is all right. According to her, she had become friends with a woman of her age at her cooking class and was babysitting that friend's grandchild. The baby, who was supposed to be sleeping in the bed while she went to the bathroom, had disappeared, causing her to panic and search frantically. I'm so sorry. This happened because of David. No, it's not your fault, Isabella. It's all David's fault. Putting a baby in a locker is unimaginable. My mother-in-law was furious, ready to lecture David at any moment. I understood her desire to speak her mind to her son, but for now, I asked her to calm her anger and quickly contact the baby's parents and her friend from the cooking class. The baby's grandmother said, "As long as the baby is found safe, that's all that matters." But I felt terribly guilty. Meanwhile, David was indifferent, staring blankly into space. After a while, a woman who appeared to be the baby's grandmother, along with my mother-in-law, hurriedly arrived to pick up the baby. Following them, a woman who seemed to be the baby's mother also rushed in. Seeing the arriving woman, David's eyes widened in shock. "Ava, why are you here?" The woman David called Ava was the mother who arrived later. "That's my line. Why is David here?" The mother screamed in an almost hysterical voice. My mother-in-law, the baby's grandmother, and I could only watch the scene unfold in stunned silence. "Anyway, let's change the location. It's inconvenient here. Come to my house." With a heavy and suffocating atmosphere, we all moved from the scene and got into a car driven by Ava. Everyone was silent, with David's face turning pale. The only sounds in the car were occasional cries from Charlotte and Ava's baby. Now, let's explain what happened, shall we? Once we arrived at Ava's house, we were led to the living room. My mother-in-law, Ava, and her mother, and David and I sat facing each other. David looked like a criminal about to be judged. As a victim dragged into this situation, I hardly understood what was happening. What exactly is the relationship between David and this woman named Ava? Could you first explain what your relationship is? Curious, I immediately asked the question. Depending on their relationship, I, as David's wife, might need to react differently. My mother-in-law also seemed greatly surprised, clearly confused by the unfolding reality. She probably never imagined her son knew her friend's daughter. Only David seemed to fully understand the situation, evident by his pale face. For David, things must be very complicated. I'm dating David. The moment Ava made that declaration, I was speechless. What does she mean? Dating David? David is currently my husband. If they're dating, does that mean he's cheating? Yet Ava openly admitted this to me, his wife, which seemed odd. She could have tried to be more evasive. Is that true? I'm David's wife. Are you two having an affair? David avoided my gaze and did not respond. I took his silence as an affirmation. However, Ava was shaking her head in denial. One admits to an affair while the other one denies it? What does this mean? I had no idea David was married. He said he was single, so I dated him. Why? So, that's what it was. I glared accusingly at David. The worst kind of man, hiding his marital status and pursuing another woman. According to Ava, they met on a dating app about 6 months ago, around the time Charlotte was born. When they met, Ava had been a mother for about 2 months. It was surprising he started using a dating app at that time, but as a single mother raising a baby, Ava felt she needed a father figure. The baby's biological father had run away upon learning of her pregnancy. While I sympathized with Ava's circumstances, it didn't excuse infidelity. However, I couldn't blame her for not knowing David was married. My frustration and anger were directed solely at David. David, what you've done is outrageous. Not only putting a baby in a locker, but also having an affair? You're truly despicable. Even though my mother-in-law was present, I couldn't hold back my condemnation of David. She must be furious knowing her son's terrible actions towards his wife. She seemed like she wanted to interject, but my intense confrontation with David left no room for her. I didn't even know Ava had a child. If I had known, I wouldn't have dated her. This is a fraud. What are you going to do about it? What? You're the one committing fraud. Why didn't you tell me you had a wife? And putting Madison in a locker? You must be out of your mind. I made a mistake. I intended to put Charlotte in there, not your child. How would I know it was your kid? If you had told me about your child, this wouldn't have happened. I was going to tell you. Timing is important for these things. The room erupted into chaos with David and Ava shouting at each other. Startled by their loud voices, Charlotte and Madison began crying, and my mother-in-law and Ava's mother tried desperately to soothe them. Putting a baby in a locker is unforgivable no matter whose child it is. You could have endangered a life. Do you even understand that? It was fine. I just wanted to scare her a bit. Frustrated by David's callousness, I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag. I can't do this anymore. Sorry. Let's get a divorce. What? I had been contemplating whether things would ever work out with David. He didn't just neglect Charlotte, he seemed to resent her very existence. My disgust grew every time I saw his attitude towards us. So I had already prepared the divorce papers, waiting for the right moment. This incident was more than enough reason for me to finalize my decision. David, stunned by the sudden presentation of divorce papers, must not have imagined I would leave him. His affair with Ava was probably just a fling. David's fleeting whim had dragged Ava into this mess, and now I couldn't stay with him any longer. I can't stay with someone who tried to harm my child. Please file the divorce. Wait, why suddenly divorce? I won't agree to that. It's not sudden. You've been horrible to Charlotte and me since she was born. And after causing such an incident, do you think it'll just go away? Of course I'll expect property division and child support. David finally seemed to grasp the reality of the situation, standing up and then kneeling down, pleadingly looking between me and Ava. Wait, please, I can't afford property division. Ava, help me out here. Oh, right. After divorcing Isabella, you'll marry me, right? You said you wanted to be with me. I said I wanted to marry you because I thought you were single. I can't trust a man who puts a baby in a locker. I'll never marry you. Ava's firm refusal to marry him seemed to hit David hard, leaving him deflated. Well, that's unfortunate for you. You're paying the price for treating your wife and child so carelessly. Now, please leave. This child doesn't need a father like you. I gestured dismissively, as if shooing away an annoying insect, and David left Ava's house with a frustrated look, clutching the divorce papers I had handed him. I was uncertain if he would actually file them, but I was determined to turn him away if he ever came back to our home. I'm truly sorry to have involved everyone in this situation, and Ava, I can't condone infidelity, but you're a victim too. Please find someone better than that man. No need to accuse yourself. I'm so sorry that David did such awful things. My apologies. I'm actually glad I found out early that he was such a terrible person. We exchanged smiles, a weight lifted off our shoulders, feeling a sense of relief. Afterward, my mother-in-law and I left Ava's house. Charlotte was peacefully sleeping through all the commotion. I want to live for her happiness and raise her to be a wonderful adult, even if it means doing it alone. Several months later, my divorce from David was finalized. At first, David refused to file the divorce papers, but after repeatedly turning him away when he came back home, he finally gave in. My mother-in-law strongly supported the divorce, and through a lawyer, I received property division and child support. I plan to return to my job as a nursery teacher, even though it will be busy juggling work and childcare. Somehow, Ava and I became friends. It's odd to think that I'm friends with my ex-husband's affair partner, but it works because Charlotte and Ava's child medicine were born around the same time and play well together. We even visit each other's homes 2 or 3 times a month. Both of us were doing one-parent childcare and found support in each other. It's encouraging to have someone who understands the struggles. We've developed a good relationship. where we can discuss things like nursery, weaning, and child development. I've had enough of man for a while. Just medicine and me is plenty. I feel the same. And I'm glad we became friends, Ava. Me too, Isabella. I'm looking forward to our continued friendship. Likewise, please take care of me. I'm prepared for more challenges ahead, but I'm determined to take things at my own pace. With Charlotte by my side, I feel like I can overcome anything.